So this is the official welcome to the webinar. It's about transparency in practice with high-resolution satellite data and the integration of NICFI planet satellite data into explorer.land. And the main goal of today is to show you and explain and give you a little bit more of a background of the data itself, but then also show practical examples, how practitioners in nature-based projects use this data to document impact in nature-based projects, and this for different ecosystems around the globe. So for the structure of this webinar today, Luisa Teixeira will start first and give an introduction to the data itself and also provide some use cases. Then we will show how this data set is integrated into explorer.land. And then we will close with a Q&A and hopefully quite interactive discussion at the end. Should you have questions during these two presentations, please type them into the chat. My colleague Emilia, she will collect these questions and will later ask them to us and will help to moderate. That's it, basically. I want to take the chance now to welcome Luisa Teixeira from Planet. She's supporting the NICFI program, and she will start with a 10-15 minute presentation now. So the floor is yours.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you, Alex, and hi everyone. I'm really glad to be here. I think explorer.land is one of the best examples in vehicles for the NICFI satellite data program, because it really allows the data and the information to be serviced to so many people working in a relevant field. So Alex, how Alex mentioned, I'm just gonna go through a presentation. I'm gonna explain a little bit about Planet in case you're not familiar with it already. And then I'm gonna go over the NICFI satellite data program, tell you what that's all about, and I'm gonna end up with some use cases, just like 3 examples, just to kind of illustrate what we've been working on and what the user community has been working on. So I work for Planet. I am supporting the NICFI satellite data program. And at Planet, we used to say that we cannot fix what we cannot see. And Planet, then our mission and the way we're working is that we build and we deploy and operate satellites in space. We have a really large constellation of small sats. They're about the size of a shoebox or a loaf of bread, depending on who is telling you the story. And they circle the Earth every day, and they capture and image the surface of the Earth at more or less daily rate. And we feel that that's actually quite groundbreaking and really allows us to see change much more often than we could before. And it also has another constellation that you see on the upper right corner. It's for SkySat, and it's a bit more of a traditional constellation in which we direct the satellites to specific locations, and it has a higher resolution. So just to really set the ground on what Planet is, which is a commercial satellite data operator. And sorry, exiting the video is always a little problematic. So when it comes to the NICFI satellite data program, it's kind of important to understand the context of how forests have been monitored with satellite data in the past. So starting with the Landsat mission in the 70s, satellite data has been used for forest monitoring, deforestation tracking at a scale, but that resource in the past was not open for many years. The resolution is coarser, or it's 30 meters per pixel, and the data is only acquired at a cadence and a rhythm that's quite lower than daily, let's say. So with the advances of technology and the fact that there is now a solution like planets that can image the whole surface of the Earth every day, it became interesting and quite appealing to be able to use that kind of data to be able to track projects in deforestation much faster, and with the idea that we can eventually actually stop some deforestation from happening rather than just report on it. In this slide, you see just an example of an image from Landsat on the left-hand side and planets on the right-hand side from the same location. And this is really just to illustrate how much more accuracy and how much more detail you can actually get when you image the Earth more often at a higher resolution. So Landsat's 30 meters, planets about 4 meters. And that gives us different capabilities and opportunities to see things in detail. Another aspect that's quite important is the temporal resolution. So this fact that planets can actually capture images much more often. So here I'm just going to go through 3 slides, maybe back and forth, because otherwise it's hard to see. But we have an example over DRC from September 8th. And if we go to April 23rd in the same location, we see that a lot of roads have been opened through the forest and that there's also some spots of deforestation in between the roads. But then a couple of months later, the roads are still there, but these spots that were previously cleared, they don't seem cleared anymore because some vegetation has grown in the meantime. So in fact, there was degradation of the forest besides the obvious deforestation from the roads that it's kind of hard to pinpoint. So if we could not see this location so often, we actually may miss out on the fact that degradation has occurred. And as we know, or we kind of have been much more being informed lately, and research has really been quantifying degradation is really problematic when it comes to both the carbon problematic, but also in terms of biodiversity effects. So having a higher temporal resolution is really crucial to allow for this kind of insights and enable action. And it's a bit in this context of we have higher resolution, higher frequency data that the NICFI satellite data program came to be. The Ministry of Environment and Climate in Norway decided to fund this program with the goal of reduce and reverse the loss of tropical forests, contributing to combating climate change, conserve biodiversity, and facilitate sustainable development. And the data is free to be used by anyone that wants to contribute to this purpose, provided that it's for a non-commercial, non-profit generating goal. And with this, I really like to stress this part out because commercial entities are very welcome to use the data. But it's not, the intention is not that they generate a business on top of this and generate profit, but that they can improve their own operations and make sure that they are not contributing towards deforestation, or they're actually working towards reversing deforestation. So what should we keep in mind when we're talking about this program in terms of data? First, what is the data that's being offered and made available? You see this image is a very rough screenshot of how the footprint, so the AOI of the base maps looks like. We cover the tropics more or less. There are some areas in the tropics that actually are deserted or not covered in forest. So those have been excluded, but the majority of the tropics is actually included. And the program makes available both visual and analysis-ready mosaics every single month, starting from September 2020. The pixel size of these mosaics is 4.77 meters. This means it's like the resolution of the image. And the mosaics, which are a combination of many images stitched together, and they're optimized for low cloud cover. They provide the channels of RGB, so red, green, blue, and also near infrared. These mosaics can be streamed directly online. They can also be downloaded for qualitative or quantitative analysis. And they are available with a perpetual license, which means that as a user, if you actually download the data, you can use it forever in the future. In terms of the data that's available, so I said that the monthly mosaic started in September 2020, which means every single month, more or less 10 days, I think, of the next month, the new mosaic is being made available. And before September 2020, we have a set of biannual mosaics starting to December 2015 to August 2020. This was mostly due to availability of data, because Planet actually started operating in the 2015s, 14s. So it took some time to get enough data to create good quality mosaics for this. And as I mentioned, we have a CC non-commercial type of license. This is quite permissive, and it's really kind of encouraging people to use the data. And when it comes to using the data, there may be some things to keep in mind. So besides the fact that we're talking about monthly mosaics, which means that is a selection of images from within 1 month. They can be from the beginning of the month, from the middle or the end. And they are really selected in an algorithmic logic of, let me take the best image available for this 1 pixel. So this is thought for forest change cover detection in the tropics, obviously, because that's the region of interest. And it's for changes that occur at least a cadence of a month or several weeks, let's say. So it's kind of important to keep that in mind. It was designed to increase coverage in cloudy areas. And this is also one of the reasons that the time step is 1 month. So there's regions of the world in which there are clouds actually every single day. And by having 1 month to choose from, we have a higher probability of having pixels that are not cloudy, and thus creating a cloud-free image. I have to say that in some countries, it's still not happening for every month. But in other regions, we've had feedback from people that are really happy to say that, oh, finally, we can actually have a whole picture of our country without any single cloud. And that feels very unique and very special. Because of this issue with clouds and the way the algorithm is creating these base maps of scale, there have been issues in the past about positional or misalignment error, which means that some pixels or some sections of the base map have been suffering some kind of displacement. These are still within Planet's operational values. We have a 90% of overall, 90th percentile of overall geolocation error. But if you are a user and if this occurs, you're very welcome to actually email us and let us know. And most of the times we can correct this kind of error. And in some regions, like I mentioned, it's all still can happen that some pixels have clouds, haze, or cloud shadows, because there's simply no other better image available for this 1 month period. The mosaics are also optimized for NDVI thresholds monitoring. So they're really designed to look at time, like a time series kind of perspective, see how things change in time. And they, although a lot of researchers have been using it for other kinds of ecosystems with quite a good level of success, they were kind of designed for continuous canopy, so really like forested regions, which doesn't mean that doesn't work for other regions. But there could be more difficulty in seeing things like changes in phenology. If you want to sign up directly, I mean, I'm pretty sure you have access through explorer.land, but if you want to see the data directly, eventually download some data, you just have to go to www.planet.com/NICFI and you can sign up. And once you get an account, you will just be able to access the data via Planet's interface or eventually directly in QGIS via plugin and other possibilities. In our resources in Planet's website, you will find all the information for that kind of access, including in our Planet University, where we kind of go through these resources and we give some tips on how to use the data. And you can also connect with other users in the Planet community for a special page for the NICFI satellite data program, or you can actually follow the program's Twitter handle, We're trying to be more proactive in terms of sharing user stories there and putting people in contact. We also raise opportunities like attending this webinar. We publicize that there. So I would welcome you to follow it and to tag us or ping us or whatever it is that could be helpful for the users of the program. And now, I just wanted to give you 3 examples of how some of our users have been using the data. In this case, we have the National Sustainable Development Fund in Mozambique. They are a user since the beginning of the program, and they've been doing really great work into integrating this new data set into their usual workflows. This example shows a little bit an animation of how they've been using the data for forest carbon accounting. So they managed to improve the accuracy of their current algorithms and to have a much more detailed quantification of the forest carbon for their territory, which has been kind of important in their NDCs and REDD-related submissions. This example is a bit of a different kind of use case. It's from University of Leuven, and they run some research project on how to identify land, fallow croplands, with the idea of assessing land restoration potential. So this is actually also in Mozambique, and they run this at scale, and by checking the seasonality of land cover and being able to assess if this is actually abandoned land or not, they could pinpoint and quantify and locate areas that could be good potentials for restoration projects for the country. And this last example is one that's really dear to me. In Rainforest US Foundation is working to provide support and technical capabilities in the Peruvian Amazon. And it's actually led by the local peoples and indigenous peoples and local communities there. And they've created a geographic data hub, let's say, where they still have internet signal. And there they download the base maps every month. And then the rangers and the people from the communities around that have less signal available, or maybe just in one location in the middle of the jungle, they bring their phones and to the data center, and there they just they download them for the phones in a format that's appropriate for Android or whatever operative system they have, and then they can use it offline. And they use it not only to prepare patrols, but also to check on payment for services agreements that they have in terms of keeping forest standing and being actual guardians of the forest and being paid for that service. And we've been having really good interaction with this group. And just a couple of weeks back, I was told that there is a particular community that is really they learned about the base maps, and they started doing learning by themselves and exploring the data. And now I think we're going to organize a little training and an exchange between my colleagues at Planet that are super experts in remote sensing and all this geospatial development of software with the indigenous peoples. And we're going to see what kind of aspects they would like to develop more and how we can help them. And I think it's just such a smart way of doing things, and very simple, but so impactful. And I think that's it for me for now, Alex. So I would invite everyone to sign up or to send questions to me. And now I guess we're going to see another set of really good examples and from explorer.land.
Yeah, so Luisa, thank you very much for this deep insight as an introduction to this, to the NICFI data. I will take on now the presentation. Let me share my screen. Is it accessible now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so just to myself quickly, I'm Alexander. I'm one of the founders, co-founders of OpenForests explorer.land. OpenForest is existing now for 12 years in the space of forest information management, remote sensing, and map-based project presentation. And over the past years, I can say that geospatial applications have made a big leap. And some of my sincere hopes have come true. So today there is satellite imagery available with global coverage, as Luisa mentioned, in high resolution, and even at affordable costs or free of charge. Today, I will discuss how to enable simple access to high resolution satellite imagery by Planet, which is, as mentioned, financed by Norway's International Climate and Forest Initiative. I will also present the concept of geotransparency and how this data could contribute to it. And then I will follow with some example cases where satellite imagery can increase transparency. And then, of course, we will close with a Q&A where you can ask your questions and hopefully we can answer them. Yeah, so maybe starting with the access to imagery. So how do we get access to NICFI planet imagery? So until recent, access to professional high-resolution satellite imagery has not been that easy and seamless. So first of all, it has been costly, and access was limited to snapshots in certain areas and certain points in time. And it also required some GIS and remote sensing expertise to access this imagery. For example, via professional GIS software, as I show here, like a screenshot from QGIS, that is needed to install on a desktop computer. One thing, please don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of these software, which is, by the way, also open source. These are fantastic tools and have also a lot of functionalities. However, they are quite inaccessible for people without GIS knowledge or infrequent users. So internally, inside of our team, we have made a lot of thoughts on how to make it easier to access satellite time series with explorer.land. So, and the development team, I think, has done a quite good job and developed an elegant solution. So basically, it's one click to activate the NICFI timeline. So it's just down here. So if you want to try it out yourself later. Building NICFI's Planet High Resolution Satellite Time Series into Explorer comes with a couple of advantages. So first of all, in comparison to, for example, QGIS, it is web-based, so you don't need to make any installments. And also the findings can be shared just with a simple web link and then accessed even on your mobile phone. And it's available by default within every map on explorer.land. And I really believe that this monthly high-resolution time series is a valuable data set, a very valuable data set for basically every nature-based projects. So I want to do a quick excursus to the term geotransparency before really moving into the example. So what does this mean? So as you see here in this overview image, there is no single source of data that enables full geotransparency. So different sources of data enable us to build differentiated views on nature-based projects. And these views enable us to see the impact. So what happens, where and when. And better and more perspectives increase then the transparency, so the geotransparency. We need them all. But now I will show a few practical examples where NICFI satellite time series is used also in combination with other information and data sources to demonstrate the impact and increase this kind of geotransparency. I will present 4 examples. The The first example is from Asia, the second one from the Sahel zone in Africa, third one in Colombia, and the fourth in Brazil. So I will show these examples live. So afterwards, we will share the presentation so you can review them through the links yourself. Oops, I have to open the link here. So in this example shows an intact forest in East Kalimantan, Indonesia. And the goal is to protect it and detect encroachment like deforestation, as also Luisa mentioned, as an early stage, not maybe after it's after the forest is already gone. So what you see here, the base map is relatively cloudy. It has a high resolution, but we don't know from when the imagery is. And also by switching between other base layers, the clouds shift a little bit, but you can't see them really. Yeah, when I now switch on the Hansen tree cover loss data and zoom out a little bit, which is a tree loss data set that shows tree loss on an annual base, you see there's quite a dynamic in the area in terms of land use change and deforestation. Yeah, but we also see that the area which we're looking at is quite intact. And I just want to go to one tiny area on the top. So this from here, you see from there, a potential threat could arrive to the project. And you see there's still cloud cover there. We cannot really see what's going on there. And I'm going to filter the forest loss to a time between 2018 and 2021. So, and I want to ask you to focus on this area. I will switch it off now and make it a little bit bigger, the screen. And now I click the button to check out on the NICFI timeline how this looks. And if we have a look, we can see that the forest has been lost there in the area. But if I'm now going back, let's say a few years to 2018, we could see that the forest was still intact in this area. And when I'm now moving through the timeline, the forest slowly opens up and we could see it emerging in this area. So this is an example where there was for this month no cloud-free imagery, but you find sufficient imagery when you zoom through the timeline to see this progress. So, and this is a way how you can detect forest loss at a much earlier point in time and potentially implement some measures against it. That was the first example. I now move to the next example. We will now fly into a total different region. So we will fly into the Sahel zone in Senegal. This is like a semi-arid areas. And within that area, the approach was to fence some of these areas to keep out grazing and then do some additional plowing activities in order to retain water in the area, keep out the grazing animals, and with that increase the biomass in this piece of land. Yeah, I will now also activate the timeline. So the area has been started to restore in 2019 and 2020, as you see here. So I will go to 2020. So you also have to see this is an area that develops much slower than, for example, the tropics. So I will move now through this area. What's interesting to see is that we can see the seasonalities also through the imagery. So the entire area is changing. And it also takes a little bit to see the differences. But after a while, you can clearly see that the accumulation of potentially biomass is increasing in this area. And the activities have led to a more lush vegetation in comparison to the rest of the location. So now I'm moving to the next example. This is a conservation and restoration project in Colombia. And I really like this project because I would say it's really a success story. So I'm going to switch out the drone maps here. So the project started 2012 in this area, and then expanded 2018 to this area, and later 2020 and 22 to these areas. So it's a quite huge area that has been put under protection. I'm also removing the sidebar. And I want to focus on this area for the mean of this example. You also see there's huge cloud cover in these areas. So it's a difficult area in terms of finding cloud-free imagery. I want to show in this case, the global land cover that shows, okay, the area that's marked here, it's forest area, and then you have some herbaceous vegetation, some grasslands surrounding. And if we also switch on the forest loss layer, we see there's also a quite dynamic, quite high dynamic in land use change around this area. What I really find fascinating when we have when we switch on the NICFI timeline and focus on the central area, and we go a little bit back in time and really move through the timeline, we could see how the surrounding areas are really dynamically changing. But the project itself, so the project area, really stays intact. And yeah, here's an example of a cloudy image. So you see it's an extreme complex area in terms of clouds, but thanks to the timeline, which is available on a monthly basis, there's the possibility to monitor the intactness of this area through time. So now moving to the last example from Colombia, we now want to show how this data could also be used. So we go into a new use case, and this new use case will be presented in, I will open it soon, for Brazil. And this is an example where NICFI has contributed to reforestation together with WeForest, who's the project developer. And NICFI has sponsored, on behalf of their customers, the restoration of up to 1,000 hectares of reforestation areas. And this is an example of how this data also could be used in communication with, for example, corporate sponsors or donors or public donors. So, and the contribution of NICFI is then broken down to different projects. And a big fraction, what you see here, around over more than 500 hectares went into a project in Brazil. It's a quite intense agricultural area. And with the establishment of wildlife corridors, this program wants to help species to migrate through this intensive agricultural area. So, and now we want to check, or maybe NICFI wants to check, okay, is the funding that I have provided, is that making any difference on the ground? And we can check here, for example, one area where we can fly in. So you see this area has been sponsored by NICFI. It's like 12 hectares. And the goal of this activity was to put some 3D view on, because then it's easier to see also the corridors. So you see there's a wildlife corridor coming from the top and goes down, but it was not connected. And the goal of this initiative is to connect these wildlife corridors. And by switching on the timeline, the NICFI timeline, you could see that the restoration work really has happened. And every client and NICFI itself could see that the money really has flown to the ground. So if we go back in time, we really can see that this used to be a pure agricultural area. At some point in time, this corridor area has been put aside from the agricultural management. We could see that already. And then if we check out the recent monthly satellite images, we can see that the forest has grown back and enables migrating species to go through the intensive agriculture. I think this is really a good example of how satellite imagery can significantly improve the geotransparency. And we also believe that this could also unleash more funding to the conservation and restoration space, because usually it's difficult to invest abroad big amounts of money if you can't see and monitor anything. And in order to get higher geotransparency, the planet data is really a valuable data source to convince sponsors to support restoration. I think that's for now the input, and we are moving now over to the Q&A session. So let me check the chat.
So there were quite a few questions for Luisa, which she answered. And hi, by the way, I'm the Emilia writing in the chat from explorer.land. There's just one for Luisa that is left. And Alex, you also have one question. So let's start. I guess the one that is left for Luisa can also apply to you, Alex. And it mainly relates to, do you know if there are any more examples of using satellite data for carbon accounting and land restoration potential other than Mozambique? So this is a question that Mike asked to Luisa. So maybe Luisa can answer it first.
Hi, thank you for the question. I had completely missed it. Could you repeat it so I get exactly the right wording?
Yes, it's easy to miss them when there's
so many coming.
so many coming flowing in the chat. So the question relates to, are you aware of any other examples where satellite data has been used for carbon accounting and quantifying restoration potential? So other than the Mozambique example.
Mm-hmm. So I guess because I had the two examples were from Mozambique, I guess that both are relevant to this question. So we are aware, I don't have the names off the top of my head, but we are aware that a lot of countries are actually using this data for their new submissions for RED funding rounds and NDC updates, so all related to carbon accounting at the at the country or jurisdictional level. And the number is expected to increase as countries need to submit, and there are advantages in using this kind of data set to get more accurate values and more recent values as well. And with regards to restoration, we do have quite a few testimonials from users that are actively using this data, both to plan restoration acquisition. There was an example I can just share like broadly that an endemic species in Colombia, a primate endemic species in Colombia, conservation organization that's tracking them and monitoring their habitats. They're actually exploring how to use this data to understand and to scale up the notion of what kind of habitat would be most likely to find these primates in, and which ones they would like to potentially buy to create and to expand conservation area. So this from a conservation perspective, not so much from restoration. But for land restoration, there's a bunch of examples in the whole value chain and the project chain of how to develop and like target, like find locations, start assessing which ones are actually more interesting or not, and then run the projects and monitor them. We have examples at all phases at this point. And maybe Alex has actually several examples from their platform.
Yeah, I can answer it more generally. So I think there are a lot of organizations currently in place that develop carbon maps to assess carbon for different biomes, which are calibrated to certain biomes. And I know that planet data is certainly a valuable input data to train the algorithms and also to update, on a monthly base, or in some areas maybe on a weekly base or daily base even, to see changes in the flux, or let's say the carbon sequestration. So.
Thank you, Luisa, and thank you, Alex. Before moving to the next question, there's one for you, Alex.
Yeah.
Would this work in smaller land areas between 1 acre and 5 hectares, for example?
In principle, yes. So it really depends a little bit on let's say the size of the area. So 5 hectare, I would say yes. 1 acre is maybe a little small to see clearly what's changing there. So certainly it can be used in terms of analyzing smaller areas, therefore it's well suited, but for the visual, let's say, verification, it's maybe not ideal. So maybe a little bit bigger sizes make it easier. So the last example I showed was like 12 hectares. So this is an area, I think, where it really starts to be easier to visually see this progress.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Alex. There's another question for Luisa, and it concerns the coverage of Myanmar. I don't know if you read it. Or is what percentage of the countries covered, and is there possibility to get these uncovered regions from other sources?
Yeah, so I was actually checking and I think maybe it's missing some edge of the country or some territory, but from what I'm seeing, and sorry, I'm really just looking at my screen trying to check, I feel we have the full country covered, but if that's not the case, please feel free to email us actually, because we can check. From what I am aware, Nguyen, we do have the whole Myanmar, but yeah, if that's not the case from your perspective, just send me a screenshot of what's missing. And then we can try to figure out ways of helping find some solution to cover that gap. Yeah, that's my best response to that at this point.
Thank you, Luisa. Do we have any more questions from the audience? You can feel free to also turn on your microphone and your camera if you want, or if you're shy, we can still allow for a few minutes to type in the questions, whatever is easier. Maybe until people think of further questions or type them in. Oh, here's one. For Alex, are all functionalities of explorer.land freely available? Will you make the forest monitoring options available for free?
Yes, so we have a free plan on Explorer, and all plans have the NICFI timeline by default integrated. So you can't even switch it off.
Yes, that's true. And for any user wishing to navigate these areas, it's available in an unrestricted way. Yes, so my colleague Jill now notified us that you can unmute yourselves if you want to ask a question. There's another one that just came in. Would you expand the satellite data coverage to Europe? Maybe let's start with Luisa first on that one, and then share.
Yeah, this is a great question. And I think, yeah, there was actually a previous question about adding carbon data above and below ground. I guess that could also go to Alex later. But in terms of coverage of this particular program, the program is running from 2020 to 2024. And as of today, the definition of what the program provides is set. It's not going to change. What I can definitely say is that it has had so much attention, and the user community is now 18,000 people and growing. And there's a lot of conversations about how this could look like in the future and after September 2024. And it's very valuable to get this kind of questions and this kind of input, because both sides of the equation, the people needing the data and the people that could provide it, are really trying to figure out what's the best way to allocate resources and how to find the resources to make data available in a fairer, more open way. So as far as I know, I don't know if there's going to be this data available in this kind of format for Europe or the Northern Hemisphere in general. But it's important for us to hear this kind of requests and questions, because we can then channel them to the organizations that can potentially create that opportunity in terms of funding and in terms of the structure to provide the data. So thank you for asking. I'm sorry, my answer is negative for now, but keep an eye on this sector and in the industry in general, because from the European Space Agency and other organizations in that region, I know there's a lot of conversations about European scale forest coverage monitoring from satellite. So there may be something coming up in the coming years. Oh, and for carbon, the same. No, we're not going to expand the type of data that's included in the program at this point, but it's definitely a technology and a kind of data set that's evolving very rapidly. So I would not discount the possibility of subsequent programs actually making that type of data available rather than satellite imagery or together with satellite imagery. Maybe Alex has something to add in terms of the platform side of things and other data sets.
So from our platform, we are data agnostic. So if there's any data available, so we're currently trying to find the open source data, which we could integrate for everyone. But basically, we are open to integrate any kind of available data set into explorer.land. So therefore, carbon, of course, that would be also amazing to have that component.
Thank you, Luisa. Thank you, Alex. There's one more question in the chat, and then I think we will have one or more directly from the audience. There's one hand raised. Maybe let's start first with the audience, and then we address the one from the chat. So,
okay, yeah, my name is Johannes. I'm part of a team here in central Mozambique, and we're creating a new carbon project with 500,000 hectares. And what would be the next steps when we say, okay, we would like to use the platform Land Explorer to make some progress of visible? What would be the next 3 steps?
It's relatively easy. So you just have to sign up, and we can also put a link here in the chat, and then you can create your project. As mentioned, we have like a free plan where you have all the data sets available to make them visible. Yeah, and then there you go. Maybe in that concern, I also will answer another question, because is there any program to learn session for beginners from OpenForests? So we have webinars recorded, and we have some few webinars in the planning. So if you're signed up to our newsletter, so you will be informed when these webinars will be. If there's, of course, a bigger cohort, students or a interest group, so we can also plan for an individual online webinar to get you onboarded and explain you the essential features.
Okay, so there's for this specific question, Luisa also answered in the chat, as did I. And do we have more questions from the audience? Any raised hands? Let me see. Well, since we have 5 more minutes, until we can wait to see if we have more questions, but maybe while we're waiting, you can both Luisa and Alex give us a few key takeaways from today's session, so we can summarize all that we discussed, and maybe mainly relating to what are the major things that we need to keep in mind when we want to use the high resolution satellite data from the NICFI program in, let's say, interpreting a land restoration potential or forest cover or deforestation.
I can go first. First of all, thank you, everyone. I think these questions are amazing, very interesting, and I think it may have even started some side conversations, which is great. And this is what we're trying to do a lot as part of the program team for the NICFI Satellite Data Program. And I think my usual key takeaways are that you just try it, see if it works for you, see to what extent it does. Because having this kind of image data available can be very useful already at a very simple use case. So just looking at it doesn't have to be sophisticated to have a good impact and a high impact in your work and in your workflows. And my second key takeaway, that's more like a suggestion, is please don't hesitate to contact us. We are really available and very happy to hear from, well, not necessarily from your struggles, but when we can help you address them, definitely very happy. But we also really encourage you to share what you're doing with the data, because who knows who else can you inspire by your example and by the work you've done. And in this year, 2023, and probably in 2024 as well, we're going to be focusing a lot in just doing knowledge sharing among the community. So we're very open to discuss ways to promote what you are doing so that other people can actually be faster in doing their jobs, and that we can build from each other's creativity, each other's efforts to really progress towards the conservation of tropical forests, and it's the restoration and biodiversity definitely comes up more and more recently. So let us know what's happening, ask questions, we will definitely make sure to help. And I am really excited to see what will come from this webinar.
Mhm.
Yeah, my key takeaway is that transparency is really key. So I believe that only if we can make projects more transparent, more geo-transparent, so this is the transparency that we're talking now about, is then we will be able to create the trust so that more funding could flow in the restoration space where it's really needed. And we have different views or possibilities to create this geotransparency. That could be drone imagery, could be geolocated news posts, it could be information recording on the ground, but also satellite imagery. And I think time series, satellite-based high-resolution time series, I think are the cornerstone for this transparency, because that's basically the medium that can show, basically for the entire globe, the progress and the impact of restoration success. So in order to get this geotransparency, I think, satellite time series is like is a central data tool to measure progress.
Thank you, Luisa, and thank you, Alex. I don't think we have any further questions, and we've been excellent with time. We just completed the 1 hour, but there's now last chance to ask a question, and if not, then it's a wrap for today.
Thank you very much to all of you for joining this webinar and the interest in that topic. We will have a recording that will also be available soon, which you can distribute in your network, and we will also send to those who could not attend the webinar. Especially I also want to thank Luisa for really enriching the insights and to the NICFI timeline, and of course my colleague Emilia and Jill in the background who's running the technology, the technique for this webinar. So have a great day all together.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.